You've had a terrible day. Maybe your boss said something that got under your skin. Maybe you got into an argument with someone you care about. Maybe nothing specific even happened. You just woke up feeling heavy, like the weight of everything landed on your chest before your feet even hit the floor. You're stressed. You're anxious. You feel this restless, uncomfortable energy sitting in your body, and you need it to stop. You need relief. You need something, anything, to make the next 5 minutes feel better than the last 5. So you pick up your phone. You open an app. Maybe it's Amazon. Maybe it's a food delivery service. Maybe it's a clothing store you've browsed 100 times before. And you start scrolling, not searching for anything specific, just scrolling, looking, browsing. And then you see it. Something that catches your eye. Something that makes you feel a tiny spark of excitement for the first time all day. You tap. You add to cart. You check out. And for a brief, beautiful moment, something shifts inside you. The anxiety loosens. The stress fades just a little. You feel a small wave of control, of satisfaction, of relief. Like you just did something good for yourself. And then 20 minutes later, you look at the confirmation email and a new feeling creeps in. You didn't need that. You shouldn't have spent that money. Your credit card is already carrying a balance. You were supposed to be cutting back this month. What is wrong with you? And now you feel worse than you did before you bought anything. The stress is back. But this time it brought a friend. Guilt. If this sounds familiar, you're not broken. You're not weak. You're not bad with money. You're caught in one of the most common and least understood psychological loops in modern life. It's called the anxiety spending cycle. And by the time most people realize they're trapped in it, it's already cost them thousands of dollars and an amount of emotional energy they can't even calculate. To understand why this cycle is so powerful, you need to understand what anxiety actually does to your brain. Because most people think of anxiety as just a feeling, an unpleasant emotion that comes and goes. But it's much more than that. Anxiety is your brain's threat detection system firing when it can't identify a clear threat. When you're in real physical danger, your brain triggers fear, which is specific and actionable. You see a car coming at you, you jump out of the way. Done. But anxiety is different. Anxiety is your brain saying something is wrong without telling you exactly what. It's an alarm with no off switch because there's no specific problem to solve. And that's what makes it so unbearable. Your brain is screaming for a solution, but there's nothing concrete to fix. You can't fight it. You can't run from it. You can't logic your way through it because it isn't coming from the logical part of your brain. It's coming from the emotional center, the amygdala, the ancient survival hardware that doesn't understand your modern life. So your brain does what it always does when it needs to regain a sense of control. It looks for an action. Any action. Something you can do right now that produces an immediate result. Something with a clear beginning, middle, and end. Something that gives you the illusion that you've fixed something. And in the modern world, the easiest, fastest, most accessible action available to you at all times is buying something. Think about how perfectly shopping fits what your anxious brain is looking for. You have a problem, the uncomfortable feeling. You take an action, you browse and buy. You get a result, the item is purchased, the confirmation appears, the thing is on its way. Beginning, middle, end. Problem, action, solution. Except it's not a solution. It's a performance of a solution. The anxiety wasn't about needing a new shirt. It wasn't about needing candles or gadgets or takeout. The anxiety was about something deeper, something unresolved, something that a purchase can't touch. But for about 10 to 15 minutes, your brain doesn't know the difference. And those 10 to 15 minutes are all it takes to keep the cycle running. Let's talk about what's happening chemically, because this is where the trap becomes almost impossible to resist without understanding it. When you're anxious, your brain is flooded with cortisol, the stress hormone. Cortisol makes everything feel urgent, threatening, and overwhelming. Your body is tense. Your thoughts are racing. Your emotional baseline is tilted toward negativity. Now, when you find something you want to buy, something that excites you even slightly, your brain releases dopamine. Not when you buy it, when you anticipate buying it. The scrolling, the browsing, the imagining of owning the thing, that's where the dopamine hits. It's the anticipation, not the purchase, that feels good. This is crucial to understand. Dopamine is the same chemical your brain releases when you anticipate eating your favorite food, when you're about to see someone you love, when you're on the edge of winning a game. It's the chemical of wanting, of excitement, of something good is about to happen. And when dopamine floods in while cortisol is already high, it creates one of the most addictive emotional cocktails known to neuroscience. The contrast between feeling terrible and suddenly feeling a spark of pleasure is so intense that your brain locks onto it like a survival mechanism. It remembers. Next time you feel this bad, do that thing again. Buy something. Open the app. Scroll. Find something. Feel better. This is not a character flaw. This is your neurochemistry being hijacked by an environment that was designed to exploit it. Every shopping app, every website, every notification that says items in your cart are selling fast is engineered to trigger dopamine at the exact moment you're most vulnerable to it. And the worst part? The dopamine spike from purchasing something is always temporary. It fades within minutes. But the cortisol, the stress, the underlying anxiety, that's still there. It was always there. You just covered it up for a moment. So when the dopamine drops and the cortisol remains, you're left feeling worse than before. Because now you have the original anxiety plus the added weight of regret, guilt, and financial stress. And what does financial stress trigger? More anxiety, which triggers the need for relief, which triggers more spending, which triggers more regret. This is the cycle. Stress, shopping, brief relief, regret, more stress, more shopping. Around and around. Sometimes for years, sometimes for an entire adult life, draining bank accounts and emotional well-being in equal measure. Now let me tell you something about this cycle that most people never consider. It doesn't just affect people who are obviously overspending. It affects people who look completely responsible from the outside. Think about the person who never buys anything extravagant. They don't buy luxury items. They don't take expensive vacations. But every single day, they spend $15 here, $20 there, small purchases they barely notice, all triggered by low-level anxiety they've learned to live with. Or think about the person who is incredibly disciplined for weeks at a time. They budget perfectly. They meal prep. They resist every temptation. And then one bad day hits, one stressful week, one emotional breaking point, and they blow $200 in a single evening on things they don't need. Then they spend the next week beating themselves up about it, which creates more stress, which brings them closer to the next breaking point. This is the binge-restrict pattern, and it's the anxiety spending cycle wearing a different mask. The person looks disciplined most of the time, so they don't think they have a spending problem. But the emotional damage and the financial leakage from those periodic binges adds up to the same result over time. And here's the most painful version of this cycle. The one where the thing you buy to relieve your anxiety actually creates a new source of anxiety. You buy something expensive to feel better. Then you check your bank account and feel worse. So you avoid looking at your bank account entirely, which means you lose track of your finances, which means bills surprise you, which creates more anxiety, which triggers more spending. Some people haven't looked at their bank balance in months, not because they're lazy, but because looking at it triggers the exact anxiety they've been spending money to avoid. The avoidance itself becomes part of the cycle, a protective wall that keeps the truth out, but also keeps the problem locked in. So why does shopping specifically become the go-to coping mechanism? Why not something else? The answer has to do with something psychologists call perceived control. Anxiety, at its core, is a feeling of being out of control. Your thoughts are out of control. Your emotions are out of control. Your circumstances feel out of control. Everything feels uncertain and unstable. But buying something? That's entirely within your control. You choose what to buy. You choose when to buy it. You choose the color, the size, the quantity. You click the button. You make it happen. In a world that feels chaotic and unpredictable, purchasing something is one of the few actions that gives you an immediate, guaranteed outcome. You click buy, the thing arrives. Cause and effect. Control. Certainty. There's also an identity component that runs deeper than most people realize. When you buy something, you're not just acquiring an object. You're briefly stepping into a version of yourself that feels more put together. New workout clothes make you feel like someone who exercises. A new planner makes you feel like someone who's organized. New kitchen gadgets make you feel like someone who cooks beautiful meals. For a moment, the purchase lets you try on a better identity, one that doesn't have the problems and anxieties you're currently drowning in. And that fantasy, that brief mental vacation into a better version of your life, is incredibly seductive when your current reality feels overwhelming. But of course, the workout clothes don't make you exercise. The planner doesn't organize your life. The kitchen gadgets sit in a drawer. And eventually, you're left with the same problems, the same anxiety, and a closet full of evidence that buying things doesn't change who you are. Let me tell you about a concept that completely reframes how to think about this cycle. Psychologists who study addictive behaviors talk about the difference between wanting and liking. These sound like the same thing, but they're processed by completely different systems in your brain. Wanting is driven by dopamine. It's the craving, the pull, the urge to acquire something. It's the feeling you get when you see something online and feel that magnetic tug toward buying it. Liking is driven by a different system, the opioid system in your brain. It's the actual enjoyment, the real satisfaction, the genuine pleasure of having and using something. Here's the disturbing part. In the anxiety spending cycle, wanting gets stronger over time, but liking stays the same or even decreases. You want to buy more and more, but each purchase satisfies you less and less. The gap between wanting and liking grows wider with every cycle, which is exactly what happens with any addictive behavior pattern. This is why you can look at a closet full of things you bought and feel nothing. The wanting was intense when you clicked purchase, but the liking never showed up. The pleasure was in the chase, in the anticipation, in the brief dopamine spike of the transaction. The actual product was never the point. And once you see this, once you really understand that the satisfaction you're chasing doesn't live in the product, but in the neurochemical hit of buying it, the entire cycle starts to look different. You're not shopping for things. You're shopping for feelings. And feelings can be found in places that don't cost a single dollar. So how do you actually break this cycle? Not with willpower. Not with shame. Not with cutting up your credit cards in some dramatic gesture that lasts about 2 weeks before you sign up for a new one. You break it by interrupting the loop at each stage. And there are 3 stages to interrupt. The first stage is the trigger. The stress, the anxiety, the emotional discomfort that starts the whole process. You can't always prevent triggers. Life is stressful, but you can change your awareness of them. The most powerful thing you can do is learn to name what you're feeling before you act on it. When you feel the urge to buy something unplanned, stop for 10 seconds and say to yourself, out loud if you can, I'm not hungry for this product. I'm feeling anxious and I want relief. That single sentence does something remarkable. It moves the experience from the unconscious emotional brain to the conscious rational brain. It takes the unnamed, shapeless feeling and gives it a label. And labeled emotions lose about half their power immediately. This isn't theory. Brain imaging studies show that the simple act of naming an emotion reduces activity in the amygdala, the brain's alarm center. Just identifying what you're feeling, literally saying the word anxiety or stress, begins to calm the very system that's driving you toward the purchase. The second stage is the action, the browsing, the scrolling, the searching. This is where environment design becomes your most powerful tool. You need to create friction between the urge and the action. Delete shopping apps from your phone. Remove saved credit card information from websites so you have to manually enter it every time. Unsubscribe from every promotional email. Unfollow every brand and influencer that makes you want to buy things. Each layer of friction you add gives your rational brain a few more seconds to catch up with your emotional brain. It sounds too simple to work, but research on habit formation shows that even small amounts of friction dramatically reduce impulsive behaviors. Making a purchase go from 1 click to 5 clicks can cut impulse buying by over 40%. You're not relying on willpower. You're redesigning the environment so that the easiest path is no longer the spending path. The third stage is the reward, the relief, the dopamine hit. This is where you need a replacement, not elimination. Your brain needs relief when it's stressed. That's not negotiable. What's negotiable is where that relief comes from. Build a list of free or low-cost activities that give you a similar neurochemical shift. A 10-minute walk outside, calling a friend, doing a short workout, writing in a journal, taking a shower, playing a game, listening to music that changes your mood. These aren't as instantly gratifying as clicking buy now, but they provide something that shopping never does. They actually address the underlying emotion instead of just covering it up. Over time, your brain starts to associate stress relief with these healthier actions instead of with purchasing. The neural pathway gets rewritten. The cycle weakens. And eventually, the urge to shop when you're anxious starts to feel like an old reflex that doesn't quite fire the way it used to. There's one more thing I want to share, and it might be the most important part of everything we've talked about. If you recognize yourself in this cycle, if you've been shopping your way through stress and anxiety and guilt for months or years, please hear this. The shame you feel about it is not helping you. In fact, the shame is part of the cycle. It's fuel. Every time you beat yourself up after an impulse purchase, every time you call yourself irresponsible or weak or stupid, you're adding another layer of emotional pain that your brain will eventually need to escape from. And how will it escape? The same way it always does. By reaching for the quickest relief available. Shame doesn't fix spending habits. It feeds them. The way out isn't punishing yourself for the pattern. It's understanding the pattern so clearly that it loses its grip on you. It's seeing the cycle from the outside, recognizing each stage as it happens, and gently, patiently, redirecting yourself towards something better. Not perfect, not overnight, just better. One interrupted cycle at a time. Because here's the truth about the anxiety spending cycle. It was never really about money. It was about pain looking for an exit. And the exit was always there. It just wasn't in your shopping cart. The most valuable thing you can buy with your money is nothing. Just the quiet peace of knowing you didn't need to buy anything at all.